Let's talk college football. This is going to be the week 6 recap, and we're also going to look ahead this week into some of the games coming up. Let's start with the most obvious and biggest one. Unranked Vanderbilt beats number 1 Alabama in Nashville. I don't know if I've ever seen a team go from the high of beating number 1 Georgia to then losing to literally the worst team historically in the SEC and one of the worst FBS teams historically. Now, to be fair, this is not your typical Vandy team. They are clearly better than previous years. If they were typical Vandy, they wouldn't have beat Virginia Tech week 1. They wouldn't have taken Mizzou to overtime. But at the end of the day, it's still Vandy. They lost to Georgia State, right? I have never seen a team from start to finish just absolutely dominate Alabama's defense like Vanderbilt did. Vandy was 12 of 18 on third down. Alabama simply could not get off the field. Alabama also had 2 turnovers. Vandy had 0. There were costly penalties. This Alabama team is not disciplined. They're very undisciplined. And it's clear that there's been a culture shift from when Saban left to now DeBoer, which is fine. Like, it's a new coach, it's a new era, there's going to be a new personality for Alabama. But that doesn't give you an excuse to go lose to Vanderbilt. Despite the penalties and the turnovers from Alabama, on offense, they took care of business for the most part. Like I said, obviously some penalties, some turnovers, but they had the ball less than 18 minutes in this game. Alabama had the ball 17 minutes and 52 seconds. Vandy had the ball 42 minutes and 8 seconds. I mean, that right there, that's the story of the game. Alabama had the ball 18 minutes. They still were able to put up 35 points in 18 minutes. The problem is, Vandy put up 40 points in 42 minutes. Going into halftime, they interviewed Clark Lee, and they basically just asked him, like, what do you need to keep doing? And he was like, we just need to play Vanderbilt football. We need to keep playing Vanderbilt football. And to show how smart I am, I was sitting there on the couch like, this guy's an idiot. If they keep playing Vandy football, they're going to lose. Bama's going to come out and destroy them in the second half. There's no way what they're doing keeps working in the second half. They're just running read options, quarterback power, RPOs that it's like a 5-yard dump off. I was like, there's no way that's going to keep working in the second half. Alabama's going to make adjustments, and this game is going to end up being a pretty easy win for Bama. Boy, was I wrong, because that's exactly, Clark Lee was 100% right. Hit the nail on the head. They did exactly what they did in the first half, in the second half, but even better. They executed perfectly. They would get to 3rd and short, and Bama could not stop them. They would run it on 1st and 2nd down, depending on if it was more than 3rd and 5, they were probably going to pull out the RPO. If it was less than 3rd and 5, they were probably going to run the football again. And it worked every single time. As the season moves forward, we start to learn a lot more about these teams. Alabama clearly has an issue, and it's on the defensive side of the football. Since Alabama got that safety against Georgia to go up 30-7, they have not looked the same. They went up 30-7, and then from there on out, Georgia dominated their defense, and then obviously Vandy dominated Alabama's defense. There is no world where Alabama should be losing to Vanderbilt. Out of all the timelines, Alabama should not be losing to Vanderbilt. So I don't know how much of this is on the players versus the coaching. I think blame goes to all of them collectively. How does Vandy do what they did against you? That is a coaching mistake. The fact that it appears like 0 adjustments were made at halftime. They did exactly what they did from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. And it wasn't anything crazy. They had that one deep ball on 4th down. And other than that, it was the same thing the whole game, and Alabama could not stop it. So yes, I think there's blame to go to the players for a lack of effort, but at the same time, the coaches did not have this team prepared, and they didn't make the necessary adjustments at halftime. Vandy gets a massive win against the number 1 team in the country, probably the biggest win in their school history. And now I bet they lose like 28-7 to Kentucky or something. But Vandy's going to make it tough for some of their upcoming opponents. If Vandy can get to a bowl game, that would be really, really cool. They still play Texas, LSU, and Tennessee, so they would probably need to win 3 out of the 4 of Kentucky, Ball State, Auburn, South Carolina. And to be honest, I don't know if they can do that. We'll see how Vandy finishes the year. Moving on, let's talk about the next biggest upset of the day. Number 4, Tennessee loses to unranked Arkansas 19-14. Tennessee went up 14-3 in the 3rd quarter, and you expected them just to kind of run away with it, or at least hold on to it and get the win. But then Arkansas scores 16 unanswered to win 19-14. And like I said earlier, as the season progresses, we learn more about these teams. We learn more about their identity. Tennessee runs the football. ball. I think I said this in my last recap, people think that it's Tennessee with Heupel. They just throw the ball a lot. They don't. They run the ball a lot. Dylan Sampson this game had 138 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Nico only had 158 passing yards. I think the story here is, one, the Tennessee offensive line did not look good. Nico was under pressure a lot. 2, Nico is still clearly a very young quarterback with not many several starts under his belt. He's still learning. He's still growing, and people just expect him, since he's, a 5-star athlete, that he's going to come in here and be the savior for Tennessee. I don't think that's really who this guy is. Now, I think he's still young and he's clearly good and he's only going to get better. But at this point in his career, you can't expect him to go out there and win you football games. But I also saw a lot of criticism for the play calling. So then the question is, 1, is the play calling bad? 2, does Heupel know what he has or doesn't have, and that's why he's calling the plays the way he is? Or 3, is it a combination of both? Probably the latter, probably a combination that, 1, the play calling could be better, but 2, part of the reason the play calling is the way it is because he knows what this team is. He knows what they have. So at the moment, there's not too much big play capability. You can expect Dylan Sampson to get his, but the passing game's a little up in the air at the moment. But similar to Vandy versus Alabama, and we need to give Vandy their flowers, let's give Arkansas their flowers, because this Arkansas team is honestly not that bad. They're now sitting at 4-2 with a win over Tennessee. Their 2 losses are a 4-point loss to A&M and then an 8-point loss to Oklahoma State in overtime. They handed Oklahoma State that game. I don't know how they lost that football game. If they had ended up winning that game, you're sitting at 5-1 now with a top 4 win. You're ranked in the top 20 probably. I think probably the craziest thing about this game was when Taylon Green, Arkansas's quarterback, went out with an injury. Malachi Singleton had to come in, and he leads Arkansas to a touchdown to take the lead. You would have thought in that scenario, Tennessee's defense could have clutched up, backup quarterback in, and Malachi Singleton got the job done. So it'll be interesting to see what these two teams do moving forward. Arkansas has some tough games coming up though. Fortunately, they do have a bye week this upcoming weekend, but then they play LSU. Then they have Ole Miss in a couple weeks after that, and Texas. They finish the year with Mizzou. So some tough games coming up. But Arkansas needed this win bad. The Arkansas fans needed this win bad. Sam Pittman needed this win bad. Tennessee hosts Florida this weekend. Now, Florida has looked a little better recently. Tennessee's obviously coming off the loss. That's slightly interesting. My guess is Tennessee takes care of business, but Florida's hungry. And similar to Sam Pittman needing a win, Billy Napier really needs a win. Let's just go down the list of ranked teams that lost. So next we have number 9 Mizzou getting routed by number 25 Texas A&M, 41-10. And I really don't have too much to say about this game. Mizzou is not the team we thought they were going to be. The offense is not elite. Last year, Brady Cook, Luther Burden, Connor Schrader, elite trio that led Mizzou to that fantastic season. They lost Connor Schrader to the NFL, and Brady Cook and Luther Burden have not looked like the same players they were last year. Burden's still having a solid year. Brady Cook is severely struggling. They only had 254 total yards in this game, 13 of 31 passing, only 68 rushing yards. I mean, it was over from the jump. Texas A&M quarterback Connor Weigman ended up getting the start in this game, coming back from an injury, and dude absolutely balled out, 18 of 22, 276 yards. I mean, there's really nothing positive to say about Missouri in this game. Offense looked bad, defense looked bad. Texas A&M dominated from the start all the way to the finish. I think what's most interesting about these two teams is looking ahead. They have two of the easiest schedules in the SEC. At the beginning of the year, myself included, people talked about how Missouri at worst is going to go 10-2, which means they probably get in the playoff. Texas A&M is not one of the two losses I was predicting. It was Alabama and Oklahoma, which they have coming up in a few weeks. However, Oklahoma is not looking that good now, so now maybe the two losses are A&M and Alabama, and then you're sitting at 10-2 again, and potential playoff. I think despite having the super easy schedule, Mizzou drops at least 2 more games, bringing them to, at best, 9-3, and I don't think at that point they are a playoff team. But like I said, A&M also has a pretty easy schedule. The rest of the way, the two ranked teams they play are LSU and Texas. If they beat LSU, there's a good chance they're sitting at 10-1 when they play Texas at the end of the year. If they beat LSU and then their only other loss is to Texas and they finish 10-2 with losses to Notre Dame and Texas, I mean, that's easily a playoff team. And actually, there's a good chance they'll be in the SEC championship too, rematching Texas if that's what were to happen. Next, we have number 10 Michigan losing to unranked Washington at Washington. And I would like to say this is an upset because it's the number 10 team losing to an unranked team, but Washington was actually favored in this game, and rightfully so. Washington has looked pretty solid on the year, a close loss to Wazoo, a close loss to Rutgers. So coming into this game, it's at Washington. You have experienced quarterback Will Rogers. Washington's a pretty well-rounded team. It made sense that they were favored in this game because Michigan should not have been the 10th ranked team in the country. I was surprised they beat USC, but despite that, if you can't throw the football, you're definitely not the number 10 team in the country. Michigan ran for 174 yards, 4.7 average, and a touchdown. Donovan Edwards had a really good game with 95 yards on the ground. Mullings added 49 on the ground. Michigan literally brought in third-string quarterback, grad transfer Jack Tuttle. He's a seventh-year senior. He had time in Indiana and Utah, and I think they've already announced that Jack Tuttle will start the next game at Illinois, and Illinois is actually ranked now, so that's going to be a tough game for Michigan. But Davis Warren can't throw the football. Alex Orji can't throw the football. Jack Tuttle can kind of throw the football, and because of that, he's now the starting quarterback. Colston Loveland had 6 receptions and a touchdown. He's like the only receiver that gets basically any love on this team. But like I said, Washington with Will Rogers, 2 touchdowns, 271 yards. Jonah Coleman added 80 yards on the ground. The Washington defense held Michigan to 287 total yards. They also forced 2 turnovers. Michigan's going to have a really interesting year because depending on the game plan, if they get ahead, who they're playing, they can win football games simply because they can dominate in the trenches. But if they get behind, they can basically lose to anybody. Like I said, Michigan has a bye week and then they play at Illinois. That's going to be really tough. But Michigan is sitting at 4-2, and you just wonder how many more losses they have on that schedule. At Illinois, Oregon, at Indiana, at Ohio State. I mean, just those 4, if they lost those 4, won their other 2 games against Michigan State and Northwestern, you're sitting at 6-6. I think Michigan's in for a really, really tough season. Number 11, USC loses on the road 24-17 to unranked Minnesota. It's feeling like 2007, boys. Upsets on upsets. If you would have told me that USC was only going to give up 24 to Minnesota, 27 to Michigan, I would have said they blow both of them out. But this is not your typical USC high-powered offense team. The defense is better than ever for Lincoln Riley. It's improved. But their offense has taken a massive step back, and what really hurts them is in the trenches. Their offensive line is not that good. Their defensive line is not that good. They get bullied around a lot. The difference in this game was 3 turnovers for USC, 1 for Minnesota. That +2 turnover differential for Minnesota won them the football game. USC had a chance to tie the game up or go for 2 if they score at the end and win the game. Miller Moss throws a ball towards the end zone. Terrible decision. It's picked off. Just 2 drives before that, Miller Moss is pressured. He's hit as he's thrown. The ball barely goes, it goes like 5-10 yards in the air, picked off again. And that's the offensive line kind of failing you right there. Surprisingly, USC ran the ball really well. Woody Marks, 20 carries, 134 yards, and a touchdown. And honestly, in the second half, they probably should have been running the ball more. On the first interception, USC's up 17-10. You have a 3rd and 4. Run the football. Obviously, that's easy to say now, but you wouldn't have thrown that pick. The next drive for USC, it's tied 17-17. There's an intentional grounding penalty. Wouldn't happen if you didn't throw the football. And then at that point, they're super far behind the sticks. So then they have to throw the football. Incomplete. You end up punting. And then, like I said, at the end of the game, you're forced to throw because you don't have enough time to run. You throw a pick. It was like the last 3 or 4 drives for USC probably should have just kept it on the ground. So USC falls to 3-2. The Michigan loss doesn't look good. A Minnesota loss obviously doesn't look good. You play at Penn State this weekend. You're probably 3-3 after this weekend. The seat for Lincoln Riley might be heating up. Minnesota, on the other hand, I want to give them props because they have played 6 straight games to open the year. They played week 0, and now they've played every single week with no bye week. And that's with teams getting 2 bye weeks this year. They played the first 6 weeks of the year, including week 0. And now they're about to play UCLA this weekend. So 7 straight games with no bye week. Then they'll finally get one after this weekend. Great win for PJ Fleck and Minnesota to knock off USC. Quickly, let's talk about Syracuse, UNLV. Big win for Syracuse. Would have been a great win for UNLV to add to their resume. Kyle McCord balled out 355 yards, 3 touchdowns. Syracuse beat them 44-41 in overtime. I've said this before, but Syracuse offense is very, very good. They can score a lot of points. They can sling the ball. Their defense isn't that good. And so I think they have the capability to upset some teams because they can put up a lot of points, but they're also probably going to lose to some lesser teams like they lost to Stanford, because their defense isn't that good and they're just not a super well-rounded team. But if they're clicking on all cylinders, if the passing attack is working well, they have the capability to beat some pretty good teams. Like I said, would have been a great win to add to UNLV's resume, but really, I don't think it hurts them that much. If they win the Mountain West, they have a really good shot at making the playoff as that group of 5 champion. They have Oregon State in 2 weeks, which is a pretty big game. And then they have Boise State, which is going to be like the Mountain West game of the year. That'll be a lot of fun. But I think Boise State and UNLV, despite that loss, are going to be those top 2 teams that have a shot at the college football playoff. And then quickly, SMU beat number 22 Louisville 34-27. So Louisville has dropped their last 2, a close one to Notre Dame and now a close one to SMU. And it's like, man, if you could have pulled those out, or even if you just get one, you're sitting at 4-1, you'd be in the top 25 still. And this is one of those kind of make or break points for Louisville. It's kind of like, what is Louisville going to do moving forward? They've lost 2 in a row. You're going to keep losing, or you're going to bounce back. This weekend they play Virginia, and then the weekend after that they play Miami, which would be a great opportunity for them to get back on track. Now SMU, on the other hand, they played Kevin Jennings at quarterback this game, and it paid off. 281 yards, 21 of 27. He added 113 yards on the ground and a touchdown. SMU is now sitting at 5-1 with their only loss to BYU, who's turned out to be a really good team. Their schedule is so easy. I've talked about it before. I talked about it, I think, either week 0 or week 1 about how easy their schedule is and how they could get into the playoff just because of it. That close loss to BYU looks pretty good now. The only other ranked opponent they have on the year is 22 Pitt. I mean, there's a legit chance this team finishes 11-1, and they're probably going to need to. But I mean, you have Clemson, Miami at the top of the ACC right now, and then SMU's currently in 3rd, 2-0 in the conference. Their one loss is not a conference loss. So who knows what happens? I mean, they could randomly end up in that ACC championship. So let's talk about number 8 Miami beating unranked Cal 39-38. What a game, dude. It was late after dark. Somehow it's a conference matchup between Miami and Cal. Game day surrounding this game, the atmosphere, the jokes, the political jokes, dude, it was so awesome. It's what college football is all about. Now, getting into the game, Cal blew a huge lead. Cal was up 38-18 in the 4th quarter. They kicked a field goal to go up 20 early in the 4th quarter. And then Miami scored 21 straight in the 4th to win the game. Cam Ward did his thing, 437 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He threw a pick 6 early in the 3rd quarter that was terrible. He was rolling out to the right, throws back across his body straight to a Cal defender who takes it into the end zone for 6. And at that point, it's like, dude, Cal's actually might win this football game. And then you get to the 4th quarter, they're up 20. You think it's in the bag, and then it just all falls apart. I think Vandy this week was a great example of not letting up, keep playing till the end of the game. Cal, on the other hand, I don't know what happened, because in the 4th quarter, they just rolled over and died. Their last 3 possessions, 5 plays, punt. 4 plays, punt. 4 plays, interception. And then Miami ended up winning the football game. So Miami's gotten a little exposed the last 2 weeks. Virginia Tech almost beat them on a Hail Mary. Very controversial call to overturn the Hail Mary after calling it a completed pass. I don't know how they called it a completed pass to begin with on the field, but once they did, I don't know how they overturned it. Now, this game against Cal, it ended in controversy again because there was a clear as day targeting that should have been called against Miami. They didn't call it targeting on the field. They ended up reviewing it and still did not apply targeting to this. I mean, it made no sense. It was like the most blatant targeting I've ever seen. At this point, there was about 4 minutes to go in the game. Cal was up 6. If they get that first down, they are now into Miami territory with a new set of downs with the 6-point lead, and they don't call it targeting. Most of this loss is on Cal because you blew a 20-point lead, but it's hard to not look at that targeting call that was not a targeting call that might have given Cal the win if it was called correctly. So back-to-back weeks, Miami wins in controversy. So Miami's now 6-0. They have a bye week, then they play Louisville next week at Louisville, and Louisville's a solid team. Like I said, that would be a great way for Louisville to bounce back. But this schedule is a joke, an absolute joke. Currently, Miami does not have a single ranked team on the schedule. Nobody they've played in the past is ranked. Nobody they are going to play in the future on the schedule is ranked. Louisville's no longer ranked. Florida State's not ranked. Virginia Tech's not ranked. Georgia Tech's not ranked. I mean, Syracuse might end up getting ranked. I mean, some of these teams might get ranked, like I said. But as it stands currently, heading into week 7, there is not one single ranked team on this schedule. And I think that's going to hurt them. Not because it hurts their resume, which it does, but it doesn't really matter if you go undefeated, right? It's going to hurt them because I don't think they're really going to get tested. You would have thought Virginia Tech was the wake-up call. It wasn't. Now maybe Cal will be the wake-up call, but Clemson started to play pretty good. If they end up having to play Clemson in that ACC championship and they haven't really been battle-tested, Clemson might run right through them. So it'll be interesting to see. Miami's offense is crazy. Cam Ward is an absolute baller. I think they have the capability of beating almost any team in the country, but the undisciplined, poor defense, stupid plays, like that's definitely going to hurt them. Few teams I want to highlight here. Number 16, Iowa State beats Baylor 43-21 to advance to 5-0. Matt Campbell's got the Iowa State Cyclones looking pretty good this year. And the Big 12 is wide open. The top of the standings, not what you expected. Texas Tech 3-0 in conference. BYU 2-0 in conference. Iowa State 2-0 in conference. Colorado 2-0 in conference. Then really the only one I would expect to be up there, West Virginia 2-0. All the teams that we expected to be up there, K-State 1-1 in conference, Arizona 1-1 in conference, Utah 1-1 in conference. So the Big 12, like I said, wide open. Matt Campbell has got the Cyclones looking pretty nice. Another surprise team, number 18, Indiana. They took down Northwestern this past weekend, 41-24. They advanced to 6-0 on the year. Quarterback Rourke threw for 380 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's having a fantastic season. Dude, Kurt Cignetti, the head coach for Indiana, came from James Madison. He is a winner. He said it. Google me. I win. And he's right. They're 6-0. They're sitting pretty first currently in the Big Ten standings, 3-0 in conference. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Penn State. The only 2 ranked opponents they currently have on their schedule are Michigan and Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State, extremely tough. Michigan, though, that's a very winnable game. They do play some other tough games, though, like Nebraska and Washington. So we'll see what the Hoosiers can do, but currently 6-0 after a win over Northwestern. Boise State advances to 4-1. Ashton Jeanty, 186 yards and 3 touchdowns. Probably the Heisman frontrunner at the moment. Boise State's one loss is a very close one to Oregon. Like I said when I was talking about UNLV, I think Boise State is probably currently the number 1 group of 5 team to get into the playoff. UNLV, I think, is right behind them. Talking about surprise undefeated teams, Pitt is now ranked number 22 after beating North Carolina 34-24 to advance to 5-0. I'm pretty sure this is Pat Narduzzi's 10th year with Pitt, which is kind of crazy. Last year, though, they were not a good team, even though the year before, I think they won 9 games. But here they are sitting at 5-0. Eli Holstein, the quarterback transfer from Alabama, has been absolutely balling out for Pitt. And that changes everything, dude. Like, you look at Miami, you look at Pitt, you look at these teams that got a good quarterback transfer. It just opens up the offense. If you can score points, you can beat anyone. Now, obviously, you need a defense to win championships, but just having an elite quarterback, having a good explosive offense changes everything. You can beat any team with an offense like that. Looking forward to this upcoming weekend. Obviously, the big one, game day, is going to Ohio State at Oregon. Number 2, Ohio State taking on the number 3 Ducks. Top 3 matchup in the Big Ten. Don't know how it's a conference game, but it is. Both teams sitting at 5-0. Ohio State definitely looked like the better team, but it's a home game for the Ducks. And the one thing I will say is that Ohio State really hasn't played anybody. They haven't been tested. Oregon's had some closer games where they've had to come back and win. I mean, even week 1, Idaho, they were in a battle there. Then they played Boise State. Boise State is a legit top 20 team. So I definitely think Oregon is more battle tested and it's a home game. That'll make it interesting. Ohio State's favored by 3. Will Howard versus Dylan Gabriel. two transfer quarterbacks, and I think it might come down to that quarterback play. Whichever one plays better, I think probably ends up winning this football game. Next, we have number 9 Ole Miss traveling to Baton Rouge to take on number 13 LSU. Ole Miss is sitting at 5-1, LSU sitting at 4-1. Ole Miss obviously has this super unexpected upset to Kentucky, and then LSU lost to USC early in the year, week 1. This is a massive, massive game with playoff implications because it's one of those games that if you pick up your second loss here, like midway through the season, there's a good chance you're not making the playoff unless you end up winning out. Ole Miss really needs this one because after this, they only play 2 ranked opponents, Oklahoma and Georgia. If you take care of business in those 4 games other than Georgia, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi State, if they take business in those and then just lose to Georgia and you're sitting at 10-2 with a win over LSU, you're probably in the playoff. If you lose to LSU, you're probably screwed because I doubt they beat Georgia. LSU's in a similar boat because they still have to play A&M, they still have to play Alabama, they also play Oklahoma. If LSU drops this game, they might look at an 8-4 season. Just looking at these SEC schedules, if a 3-loss team does make it into the playoff, it's probably going to be an SEC team because some of these schedules are super brutal. If you finish 9-3 and you have like 2 really big wins and then your 3 losses are all to top 25 opponents, you're going to have a good shot at getting into the playoff with one of those last spots. Next, we have the Red River rivalry, number 1 Texas taking on number 18 Oklahoma. This is at the Cotton Bowl. Texas is clearly the better team. You never know what's going to happen in these rivalry games. And apparently, hey, it's 2024. Anybody can beat anybody. I just watched Vandy beat Alabama. But I would expect Texas to win this one big. Not too much to say about it. Would be a huge win for Oklahoma and would shake things up, but my guess is Texas advances to 6-0 this weekend. Number 4, Penn State is traveling to USC in a conference game. As we discussed earlier, USC needs this win bad. If they can get this win, that's a top 4 win for them. Get back in the win column, you're sitting at 4-2, you kind of right the ship. If you drop this one, you're 500, you're 3-3, 1-3 in conference, and I think the hot seat for Lincoln Riley is going to be a real thing. Penn State's looking to advance to 6-0. They're favored by 4. Definitely the better team so far this year, but they've had some close games. They haven't really blown out any opponent other than Kent State. You just got to wonder if they're going to be prepared for this game. I do think Lincoln Riley's going to pull out every trick in the book for this game. We have another one that's interesting that I wouldn't have thought was going to be interesting, but number 16 Utah is traveling to play unranked Arizona State, who is 4-1. Their only loss coming to Texas Tech, who I believe is 5-1. Utah is favored by 3, but this would be a huge win for Arizona State. Like I said, the Big 12 is wide open. Honestly, it'd be a huge win for Utah too, because you can't take that second conference loss this early in the year. Basically, every Big 12 game has playoff implications, not because they're all really good playoff teams, but because it's just wide open. 2 more Big 12 teams. Number 11, Iowa State, traveling to West Virginia. West Virginia, after starting out 1-2, they lost to Penn State and Pitt. After starting out 1-2, they are now 3-2, just beat Kansas and Oklahoma State. 2 pretty solid wins. And their 2 losses don't look bad at all anymore because Pitt is undefeated, Penn State's undefeated. They've won 2 conference games in a row. At first, at the beginning of the year, we were kind of like, what happened to West Virginia? They were pretty good last year. Now they're 1-2. They lose to Pitt. That's not a good look. But were we wrong? Because Pitt looks really good. West Virginia's got back in the win column. This would be a huge win if they can take down undefeated number 11 Iowa State. On the other hand, Iowa State's trying to go to 6-0. You're trying to be the best team in the Big 12. You're trying to get to the playoff. You're trying to get into the top 10. Like I said, every Big 12 game has playoff implications. Last game we're going to highlight real quick. Number 18 Kansas State traveling to Boulder, Colorado to take on 4-1 Colorado. And Colorado has quietly been winning. All of a sudden, the media started paying attention to Arch Manning, started paying attention to Alabama beating Georgia, then losing to Vandy, Tennessee losing to Arkansas. You know, there's been different headlines and storylines that overtook Colorado, and people haven't been noticing they're 4-1. So after losing to Nebraska, they beat Colorado State, then they beat Baylor in OT in a crazy game. And then they easily beat UCF this past weekend when a lot of people thought UCF was easily going to beat them. Kansas State got blown out by BYU. They're also 4-1, and that loss, although it wasn't close, doesn't look bad anymore because BYU is still undefeated. So again, a Big 12 game, it has playoff implications because whoever wins this conference gets into the playoff automatically. And as I've said a million times already in this video, the Big 12 is wide open. Like, I'm not kidding you. There's probably 8 or 9, maybe even 10 teams I could see winning this conference. That's going to do it for this Week 6 recap and Week 7 preview. College football, it's changing. It's different. NIL, conference realignment, all of that. But at the end of the day, it's still college football. It's still the best sport out there. We should have another fun weekend this weekend, and I should have another recap out next week.